This is grade 9 motion, and we're looking at speed and velocity. So here's our first example. Determine the distance traveled by a car that goes 61 kilometers per hour for 200 seconds. So it's asking first to find the distance, so that's important. I'll make my circle a little bit bigger. We're looking for the distance traveled by a car, and it tells us that it's going 61 kilometers per hour. So we're given its speed, and we're given for how long. And we know that this is speed because there's no direction associated with it. If there was a direction, then we would say that it was the velocity. So our speed formula, which is also the same as our velocity formula, essentially, is distance over time. So if we're looking for distance, we need to rearrange this, and to do that, we're going to multiply by time, and we're left with speed times time equals distance. Or the other way you could look at this is velocity times time equals distance. Either way, the formula is the same. So the next thing that we need to do is make sure that everything is in the same units. And unfortunately, this one is not, because we have 61 kilometers per hour, but our time is measured in seconds. So we need to change one of these, and I always go with changing whichever one's going to be easier. So remember, when we typically look for distances or speeds in this class, we're looking at either meters or kilometers, or if we're looking at our speeds, meters per second or kilometers per hour. So I'm going to change my seconds, and to do that, we need to know how many seconds there are in a minute and how many seconds there are in an hour. So we know, okay, I have 200 seconds, and I want my seconds to cancel out. So I'm going to multiply by, well, in 1 minute, there are 60 seconds. And then I'm going to multiply again, because I don't want minutes, I want hours. In 1 hour, there are 60 minutes. And that's going to give me, let me just do that quickly here. 0.055, and that, remember that we just found hours. The other way to look at this is just 200 divided by 3,600. And that's because that's what we did up top here. 200 times 1 over 60 is just 200 divided by 60 times 1 over 60 again. So you can just multiply that 60 by 60. Now that we have our units correct, we can plug everything into our formula. So speed times time equals distance. Well, our speed, remember, was 61 kilometers per hour. We're going to multiply that by 0.055 hours. And what that does is it cancels out our hours unit. And if we put this into our calculator, should be left with 3.39 kilometers. Okay. It's also important that we put this in a sentence when we're done. So we would just say, the car traveled 3.39 kilometers. Sorry, that's a little messy. We'll just highlight that so that I know that's my answer. Ta-da! This is the motion unit on speed and velocity, and this is example 2. So this question says, determine the velocity of a person who walks 100 meters south, then 100 meters east in 1 minute. So we have lots of information here. Let's go back and recap. Well, we know what our velocity formula is. So our velocity formula is displacement over time. remember that this is displacement over time. And velocity must have a direction and magnitude, meaning size. So I would go and make a little sketch for this. It will be helpful. So it says a person is walking 100 meters south. So if we draw this, well, we're moving in the south direction, and they're going 100 meters. And then they go 100 meters east, so we'll go over in the east direction, and 100 meters. So if we found the total distance of this, we would say that they traveled 200 meters. But remember, when we look for displacement, we're looking for a direct path. So to do that, we're going to have to look from where this red line is. And you'll notice that we now have a triangle. And so you need to use your math skills here and recognize that this is a Pythagorean theorem question. So if I label the sides, I have A, B, C. So for Pythagorean theorem, it's c squared equals a squared plus b squared. Well, we know that c squared equals 100 squared plus 100 squared. If we do the math on that, that should give us 20,000. Now we're going to want to square root both sides. And we should be left with c equals, and let me just do that quickly here, 141.42, and this is kilometers. So that is the displacement that we found. Now that we have our displacement, we are ready to use our velocity formula. Or are we ready? Well, we have to make sure that we have everything in the correct amount of units. And I just made a mistake. Let me go back. So this is 141. Let me use my eraser. 141.2 meters. I'm getting mixed up from the previous question, so this should be meters over here as well. Fix that. 141.42 meters. Okay. We also have time here in minutes. Remember, we leave things in meters per second. So 1 minute is the same as 60 seconds. So we're going to want to use our seconds. And now we're going to plug these in. So velocity equals displacement over time. Velocity equals 141.42 divided by 60. Velocity equals 2.4 meters per second. Now I have to say which direction this is going in if it's going to be a velocity. So because they traveled south then east, we would say 2.4 meters per second southeast. And that part is very, very important. So I'm just going to highlight my answer here. Very important. And finally, we could put this in a sentence and say the person is traveling at a velocity of 2.4 meters per second southeast.